Hi, I'm Mark Graban. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. Our guest today is Trent Clark. He's been to the World Series 3 times, and it's going to be, we see a World Series championship ring there. Trent Clark is the CEO of Leadershipity and founder of Courage Coach LLC. He has spent his adult working life among the top 1% in sports and business. He's dedicated to empowering people reach their goals, their peak performance, and attain their dreams. He's an entrepreneur of 12 companies, a longtime entrepreneur organization or EO member. He's best known for being a 2-sport Division I collegiate athlete, and he coached 12 years in professional baseball with 3 organizations, including, as I said, 3 trips to the World Series. He worked for the team I loved growing up, the Detroit Tigers. 2-time American League champion Cleveland Indians with 2 World Series defeats. I remember those series well. But then better yet, the 2002 world champion Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. So before I tell you a little bit more about Trent, hey, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Mark, it's fabulous to be here with you. I always love coming on Fabulous Podcast. You have one of the best, something I tune in, and I just discovered, probably about a month ago. So it's been super excited and to just get on the show. So this is great.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm not going to say it was a mistake to not find the podcast sooner.
maybe my greatest mistake. Maybe my favorite.
No, probably not. But fascinating background that Trent has. He's author of a new book, Leading Winning Teams: How Teamwork, Motivation, and Strategy Achieve Big League Success. You see the 3 rings on the cover, 2 of which he's wearing today. Trent's also host of a podcast called Winners Find a Way, and he's worked on the staff with some really famous coaches and sports executives, including, just to name a few, Nick Saban, Joe Madden, Tom Izzo, Mike Scioscia, and my personal favorite from that list, because again, Detroit Tigers, Sparky Anderson.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a pretty good list, right? Of some high performers, man.
It's a great list. That list includes, I'm also going to throw in a reference because it was from when I was growing up, Mike Hargrove, who, when he was a player, was nicknamed the human rain delay.
Yeah, you could never get away with his at-bats, right? You can't step out of the box for 14 minutes, right? I don't know what he was doing up there. Like, it's crazy. But, he could put the defense to sleep, and he probably needed to do that because he's not really fleet-of foot. So maybe that helped the average 10 points. I don't know.
Yeah, because he would have this whole damn routine of adjusting every wristband. And I mean, pitch clock era would not be kind to a Mike Hargrove.
No, I think he would get one swing and he'd be just, eliminated because on the pitch clock, he's like, the other 2 strikes are over. Thank you for coming. You need to go sit down.
Yeah. So there's the one rule change I'm not crazy about. The automatic intentional walk of just wave them down to first, as a time savings measure. Maybe a Hargrove would just start each at bat 0-2.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like, think about the Barry Bonds day, man. Like, that guy's probably seen, I don't know how many. He's. Have you ever seen his intentional walk count? It's 2x the closest ever in intentional walks. And when I talk about Barry Bonds, and we did talk about him on 108 Stitches the other night, I said, look how many times he's had intentional walks with the bases loaded.
Yeah.
Like,
there's only a handful of other players they've ever done that to. Like maybe Pujols at his prime, or
it's a tell, right? Like, of how dangerous that guy was as a hitter. So, it's pretty tough that guy is not, on ability wise, not in the Hall of Fame. I understand all the other tertiary information, but that's a tough one for me.
Yeah, and 108 Stitches is a baseball podcast. That's the number of stitches on baseball.
Yeah,
right?
Every Monday night, 9:00. I usually go live with a guy you'd love, Mad Dog, Motor City Mad Mouth. Yeah, Scott Morganroth. Yeah, he's
cool.
He's a Detroit guy.
Well, good. I hope people will check that out. And we're going to talk about coaching and leadership. From sports and entrepreneurship and business. There's so much we could dig into. But first things first, Trent. Of course, the question you're going to get here. What's your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake, Mark, was made back in 1999. I had been through the ringer on a number of professional sports teams. Now I'd been to the Tigers, I'd been to the Big Ten with Michigan State, back to Cleveland, and I was reeling a little bit. Cleveland had not renewed a contract of mine, and I had an option year, and that was after 2 World Series in the last 3 years. I thought, like, hey man, I'm doing a pretty good job. And
Yeah.
my favorite mistake was I went to the Angels and I signed an agreement, and I was excited about turning something around. Like, it was, bring that kind of Cleveland Indians world championship organization of the year here, saying all the right things. I was super excited, very motivated coming out of the interview. And I signed an agreement that listed about 33% of the information we talked about, what we would do together and what they would provide for me. And the rest of it was all, verbal. Hey, you're going to get this and you're going to get that. And it was not my favorite in the moment, right? Because in the moment, I discovered during that year of 1999 and rebuild, and they fired our manager and most of the staff and brought in Mike Sosha, and kept myself, Joe Madden, and a few cursory, medical and things like that.
And Joe Madden, a future World Series winning manager himself.
Yeah. And so there were very few people that stayed. So the place was in disarray, and that person who sold me on all we were going to do in development and bringing the Angels to the organization of the year was fired. And I was like, oh my gosh, man, like, wait a minute. And so I start going back through my agreement, realizing a bunch of these things that they provided me. And I said, hey, this guy said they were going to do this. And they were like, that's not in the agreement. That's not in the agreement.
Yeah.
That's not in the agreement. And I was like, oh, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I went from a pretty good contract to absolutely standing at the back of the bus, and being I think at that point that was my 4th or 5th season in the league. I was back at like rookie kind of basis, where I'm having to earn my way again. And I thought, oh my gosh, what did I do? And it was it was a lesson that at the time was extremely painful, of having a wife and a small child and another one on the way, and it was an impact to my family income. So the value of it was it drove an immediate need for me to have another income. And I had already started 2 businesses. I had a bad exit from my second business, which was very successful very quickly. That second company I started was I was building gyms in athletes' homes and showing them how to write that off as a part of their taxes, because this is part of their job. So we would put in $100,000 of commercial grade equipment, hammer strength, all the best stuff that all were being used in the sports arena, weight rooms of the biggest colleges, the best teams. And they were getting that now at home. And man, I was designing these things out, loving the work. And all the manufacturers went, hey, have you seen what this guy's doing down here? Why don't we have salespeople selling into these folks? And I mean, within 60 days, my business was sacked. And I'm competing against the brands I'm representing, because they're putting people right in my, and of course they're cutting me out. So there's a margin to lose there, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh. So I was thinking I'm the dumbest man in business. So now I've done another mess up here with a contract on my pro sports contract. I need money. And so I got to do an agreement with 1-800-GOT-JUNK and sign on and buy a franchise. They were up and comer. I could see they were on the rise, loved their leadership. And I bought in, and man, I made that agreement so much better. First right of refusals, all sorts of things to backstop me. And that really set me up over the next decade into about 4 or 5 agreements that helped me solidify, some wealth, some safety and security for my family, all because I mucked it up in 99.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story and the lessons learned. right? I mean, we all make mistakes, especially early in our careers, but at least recognizing that and not just being mad at them for, this might be overstating it, but for screwing you, and but realizing that there were lessons to learn. I mean, do coaches typically have an agent or even a lawyer, or is that type of thing that you
Yeah.
just deal with
Joe
yourself?
Madden does. When you sign, like,
Yeah.
now that the agents figured out that the coaches are now making 6-7 million, like in these things. But when you're a strength coach, right, and you're a bullpen coach, or you're pretty low on the financial totem pole of these contracts, you're not getting an agent. You
Yeah.
can call your family, friends, and you could hire your own attorney to look over an agreement. That's it's wise business, Mark. I didn't have
Yeah.
anyone telling me, hey, you should probably look over this agreement. And my father, who's an accountant, I did have him look over my agreements. And being an accountant in business and serving audits, and I don't think he knew the pitfalls of professional sports. And also, he's not there for the discussions like an agent might be, saying, oh, I hear what you're saying there. Like, you're saying if we do this, and if we get 100 wins, that's another 10,000. And like, okay, that's real money to guys like us. And he would have made sure that was in writing, right? He would be like, I've recorded this call, and this is all in the writing of what we talked about and discussed in our meeting, right? And I was just, I was young, I was naive, and I think at that time I was 28 when I signed that agreement and went to work for him at the age of 29. And I mean, literally like 3 weeks later, it was a pretty quick turn. And so things were happening fast, and I think it's a great lesson too, Mark. When things happen fast, things get missed, right? So
sure.
Yeah.
So are you willing to say, or I'm curious, like what are the main things they didn't follow through on that were the verbal part of that contract?
Yeah, we were scheduled to really change the environment. What kind of resources they would be offering, like in the budget. That was a big deal at the time. I remember that being a real stickling point. I remember a bonus based on some of the operations, not just through the major league team, but some of the KPIs, key performance indicators of the minor league development, of seeing teams be successful, of seeing in my world, we were judged by injuries. We want to limit days on the disabled list. You hire great athletes, and you're a pretty good team when all your great athletes are on the field, and a couple great athletes off the field make you really average in that league really fast. And so that was a huge thing. I mean, when I think about our 2002 run, that was a massive differentiator in us, where we weren't having all these superstar players. I mean, if I ask people, this is now 20 years later or more, right? 2022. If I ask people, hey, name 5 players on the Los Angeles Angels in 2002, unless you lived in Orange County, I mean, most people cannot name 5, right? You want to do it? You want to do it?
I could probably name 5. I don't know. Tim Salmon, Garrett Anderson, David Eckstein. No, I say I got 3.
That was good.
Was Mo Vaughn?
No. Gone by then.
No, Mo Vaughn was gone by then. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You did pretty good.
No, I can't.
So a couple of bigger names would be like Darren Erstad. John Lackey was a rookie that year and coming up.
That's the pitcher I was trying to think of.
We really had a couple really guys. Aaron pitching. Oh my gosh, I can't think of Aaron's last name right now. Geez, that's amazing. I'm drawing. See, I'm drawing a blank on my name.
No, see, that's all right. You got 5, but
Troy Glaus would have probably been a big one. People would remember Glaus.
Was part of so when we were talking about injuries, for one, my local Cincinnati Reds, there was a lot of optimism for the year, but 2 of their key starters have been out the entire season, basically, first base and second base. Right now, our top 3 starters are all on the injured list. and they may limp into a roughly 500 season. So like, well, I'm optimistic. What is the old Cubs expression? Wait till next year, or
they're
we'll
the Cubs
see.
are the only ones who led spring training with wait till next year, right? Like, and so, I mean, it was, what a turnaround Joe Madden and some of the executive team did there, and getting right, building a leading winning team, right? Leading winning teams, and Joe really figured out how to do that. Joe was, I had a chance to go do some work with Tampa Bay when he left.
When he was there as manager,
I can remember the conversation like yesterday. I was like, Joe, these small market teams are struggling to compete at the top level. They weren't paying very well. I mean, the average salary was in the 5 to 6 year range, and I was a 12-year guy at that point. 12, and I'm like, man, and do I want to go backwards? Move to make another move, big deal for the family. Had 3 kids by then. And I can remember distinctly having a conversation. You get good players, they got to trade them away because they cost too much. And the Yankees sweep in, or somebody like that who can afford that really quickly. LA, the big markets. And man, did he prove me wrong. Like, I think like 2 years later, the Devil Rays were in the World Series, and he's developing young talent, and some superstars were born in that program, and Longoria, and it was fun to watch. And he put a great team, again, great group of leaders around him. I would have loved to have been part of it. Maybe a little short-sighted on my part.
Well, but I mean, you answered a question I was going to ask of, I'm sure, I mean, obviously you're very proud of that Major League Baseball experience, and it's the type of thing a lot of people would really dream of. But lifestyle wise, like, there are a lot of trade-offs, especially family with kids. And as strength and conditioning coach, you are traveling with the team, or you're traveling to minor league cities.
Yeah, you're both. I mean, you player development is a big part of strength and conditioning, obviously, right? You're signing young players, and they're like, he's going to be great. We just need to get 20 pounds on him. And I'm like, that's not going to come easy, man. Like, putting calories into a 142 game schedule in the minor leagues through very harsh conditions. And I know that's a hard thing to say to people, harsh, but like, you don't have a day off. You have 6 days off as a baseball player.
It's low pay.
Low pay. You don't have money. You don't have resources, right? It's about $1,100 a month. And you think about that with rent, that's going to be pretty fast. It's gone. And it's not easy. So you're not sitting there going, oh, I can go easily afford 4,500 calories a day to eat and get my weight gain. And that's a really tough thing when you have Latin players who have not typically had a good nutritious diet anyway. Not that we're great in America, but they've gone without. And so there are challenges from a family standpoint. I have a son, my oldest son, now 26, right, was born on June 1st. And he was born, and fortunately I was there for that in 1998, which was awesome. But as a young child, like probably 2 to 5, you're young, you don't really know the calendar. So you're like, hey, it's Thursday, it's your birthday, and it might be May 25th when dad's off the road, or June 7th. Like it was very, very few times it was June 1st.
Yeah. Yeah. One other question I wanted to ask about, in particular, strength training in baseball, and how some of that, I think, has evolved. I remember in the 80s, Lance Parrish with the Tigers as a catcher. I mean, the dude was a bodybuilder.
Yeah, strong man.
He very strong man, and spent a lot of time in the gym. And I remember then, even as a kid, there were like whispers or talk in baseball that bulking up too much could be counterproductive. You lose flexibility, or you become more injury prone. And it seems like the thinking on that has evolved. Or is it maybe a matter of like how the strength training is done?
Yeah, it has really evolved. And I was a big part of it. I was a big part of it at that time, especially because I was there in 1993 where Sparky and Lance were still together knocking heads, because Sparky believed you would bulk up, you're going to not be able to move. And you remember the famous story of Lance picking up a commercial bench press of steel and throwing it in the back of his truck, like, I'll take it home and do my weights at home.
I haven't heard
that's
that
a good story. And so, like, man, this is a man child. Grew up. So, we had Dick Trzeski. We had a ton of Tigers that were part of, Big Red Machine lore. And then they'd been with Sparky. They were Sparky guys. And I had great conversations with these guys when they would be like, man, it's bad. And I'm like, man, I got to tell you, this Canseco and McGuire, they seem to be doing okay. Like, I don't know if you've seen these balls hit, and flexibility, big and strong, but worked at their flexibility. And I don't remember the year that Canseco went 40-40, right? 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases. Like, so, you got a guy who's doing some real, fun things in sports, and he's a real power of strength. And as I was educating these guys, we would talk about what they did. And I said, hey, what did you do? They played in the 40s, right? And they were like, I carried ice in the off season, and I worked on the railroad. I'm like, holy crap, man. Like, I'm like, so we just signed this guy for $1.2 million. I said, he's not going to need to go to the Rick on the railroad. I said, you think this kid, how do you think he does on the railroad? He wouldn't last a day in my shoes, Trent. I'm like, I know, right? And I'm like, I don't picture this guy carrying railroad ties either, all right? Swinging a hammer.
Yeah.
And sledge. Right. And so I just said, hey, man, like, I get it. You physically were taxed in that work. I said, we just gave him $1.2 million. So I'm going to go put his body through a ringer for about 2 hours a day in the off season. So he stays physically ready to perform for what's about to happen to him out there. You did that.
That's such a big investment in that 1.2 million. So keep investing in your investment.
That's right. Like, and that's why I think we lost it in, that was the, and it still is, I think it's less so, but I think that's the gap that was going on back then. It was like, whoa, man, you got, and I had this conversation with probably 5 GMs, and no one ever liked it, by the way. I don't know why I kept having it, because everyone hated the discussion and probably blackballed me. But the discussion is, first of all, as a strength coach, I'm one of the most highest educated degree-wise in the entire organization. Like, there's very few, I think 3% of players have a college degree, and it's very rare. And so I have a college degree. I've gone to grad school. I did not have my master's, but I had done work there. And I'm the lowest paid of all the major league contracts. And you're there the longest. You're there earliest in the morning for workouts, and on the road you go to work out 8 to 10 in the morning, and then you go to the ballpark at 1 o'clock, and then you got post game workout. So it's 15, 16-hour days. And it's a challenge, and yet you're like going, man, I'm the highest educated, I'm here the longest, and I'm the lowest paid. How's this working out? I remember my early years. I think I factored 1 year in my early years with Detroit, and I think I made $2.17 an hour, and I factored it all out. It was pretty wild. Like, you have to have a passion for it. But when I had these conversations in the GM, I said, we got a payroll of $220 million, and I'd like that all of us to take a hard look at who's in charge of $220 million and in charge of their care in the world today. Because that's CEOs, that's presidents, that's who's in charge of taking care of this. And like, you guys charge me with this and saying, hey, let's stay healthy of this, because any of these people do you no value. 70 million on the DL does you no value, right? In fact, it costs you an additional, whatever it is, to bring them other guys into the major leagues who don't have the experience, and there's a cost to that, right? So the cost of that is significant, yet no one wanted to spend money on the preventative, right? No, early on. Now they are doing it. They're seeing the value, they're seeing the ROI. And the guy who probably changed that was the super agent out of Scott Boros. Scott Boros out of Anaheim, Orange County.
Yeah,
he signed a bunch of players, hired the strength coach away, Steve Odgers from the Chicago White Sox, and he made sure, like, everyone has a plan. Like, take care of your health. Like, you will never be a part of a club if you're not healthy, and you have no value. I mean, you're a great guy, you're a great human being, you have no value. Like, it's that straight. Like, there's no one makes a club in the club, right?
Yeah.
So he just made sure that, and they've done such a good job. Like, that guy was, love him or hate him, he's always made strong investments in his players to care for them, to give them the longest chance, the most opportunity. He benefits from that opportunity, but but he's protecting his investment, but he wants what's best for them too. They want to play as long as they can. So yeah, it's a big deal.
It's cliche in a lot of businesses, and sometimes leaders mean it. They'll say things like, our employees are our greatest asset. Like, well, in sports, like, unless you also own the stadium, ultimately the players are, asset partner. I could see where, everyone's got interest in that investment. So we look at LeBron James, to go to a different sport, the longevity and the relative health he's had is he 40? He is 40. I've read, I don't have the exact number in front of me, that he supposedly spends millions a year out of his own pocket on food, conditioning, and players nowadays are, I don't know if this is exactly part of LeBron's routine, but I know, like, Northwestern football, my alma mater, and they do a lot of yoga and Pilates, and there's just so many different things they could do. But I'm impressed with LeBron making that investment, and there's never whispers or accusations, and maybe basketball never had PED scandals. I hesitate to bring it up, but back to baseball, the elephant in the room. You mentioned Bonds, Canseco, McGuire, very much caught up in all of that, at least at some point in their career. So I rambled a lot there. If you want to punt on any of that, I don't blame you. But
I think it was clear that and evident that it was going on. The thing that I missed in that, Mark. First of all, players have been cheating from the word go. You and I have been, we're Michigan kids, we're Tiger fans. Ty Cobb was like, listen, at the turn of the 1900s, right? This guy's like relatively known kind of guy who plays hard and is going to take any edge he can. There are tons of people in the Hall of Fame well known for scuffing the ball, KY ball, all sorts of things made famous by Major League and, the famous sportscaster, right? As he kind of lays out, there's a lot of things on the edge, right? That people have tried to take advantage. And even, this is my probably Hall of Fame knock on some of the PEDs. I don't think it was a good, I don't think it was good for the game. I don't know how much value the players actually got. Ozzy and Jose is a good example of that. Ozzy's his twin brother. He looks just like him. And, if you can't hit a curveball, you can't play in the league. And Ozzy didn't have the same skill sets that Jose did. And this is still the number one skill in the world, right? To hit a moving ball. And so there's so much skill. I think there's real value. The thing I missed, Mark, was that all the pitchers that we're using for recovery. I was really shocked by that. But I'll go back to the 70s when people were taking greenies, common to scuff the ball.
And greenies being like
greenies
speed, amphetamine.
And so back then we believed, right, Mark, like, hey, let's take some amphetamines. We're tired. Let's get our energy going. We'll get our system moving. Let's get moving and we'll be ready at 7:00. And they believed that was performance enhancing. That now science later disproves, like, hey, it's not going to increase your skill set. Definitely give you some a boost of energy, which may matter if you're a sprinter or something in that game. But in the skill set we're talking about in sports, I guess you're not going to fall asleep, but you probably weren't going to anyway. So they thought they were getting performance enhancement, but now they're not looked as using PEDs. But that was certainly that was the sell. So I got a little issue with that about how that works. I do think, I do wonder how much the league knew in the end, like, of all that. I just don't know. There's rumors everywhere, but rumors are just that. Like, it's hard to, again, that's back like to the contract. If it's not, not proven, not in writing, did it really happen, right? And so it's a tough one. It was a tough time. And I really felt, good friend of mine, Chad Curtis, who I coached, a guy who's not a big guy, tough player, worked his tail off, not using anyway. There's an old HBO special with him involved in that. Like, they want to level the playing field and make sure that everybody was playing with a clean slate, because It's pretty impressive, man, when you see some of the talent and how far they can hit a ball. I mean, it's not normal.
Right. Or like you said, being able to adjust to a slider, or it's not just that the ball is fast. I mean, I gave up on baseball like freshman year in high school.
Yeah.
I don't think I certainly never threw a curveball. I don't think I ever hit a curveball. I've got a broken finger, a mangled kind of jangly pinky finger, because I think I made a mistake freshman year before I quit baseball. I was trying out for the team. We were in the gym because it was Michigan in February on basketball court floor. And I think a kid I was catching, I don't know, he threw something in the dirt and it bounced. And I'm supposed to keep my right hand behind my back, but you
Or a
get
fifth.
sloppy
You
and
make it a
hit
fifth so you don't break it.
And it hit that finger, and I think it never healed properly. But
So that's your
anyway,
favorite mistake,
there,
right? You're like, hey, I should have had a fifth. Should have had my hand behind my back.
Well, no, I mean, I think, it wasn't a mistake to quit baseball, because I think part of why I didn't get proper medical attention is that I was then having to rush to jazz band practice where I played drums, and I decided like music and other things were going to be a better use of my time. But, I want to ask you a little bit, lessons learned from sports. And again, we're joined today, Trent Clark. His book is Leading Winning Teams: How Teamwork, Motivation, and Strategy Achieve Big League Success. One thing, of course, on the theme of this show, I wanted to ask you about is, lessons about bouncing back from mistakes. What can we learn from athletes that would apply to entrepreneurship or our own work?
Yeah, I think that the great thing about athletes is, right, we fail all the time, right? It's just a massive humanity and failure. So you really get you really get neutral to failure. In fact, you expect it, and I think that's a great lesson that athletes have, and that's really what leading winning teams is all about. It's all about these lessons in sports that will absolutely translate into organizational leadership and moving your career ahead, because there's so many things from athletics that we learn. And I think that's a great one, is that mistakes are going to happen, roll with it, review the tapes, go back and get the feedback in good and bad. Like we do tape review when you win, 17-1, you do tape review. And when you lose 17-1, it's a lot more detailed and a lot harder. That tape review is a little more painful. And I think we've talked about my TEDx, the pain exchange, the realization that all the athletes go through. I went through the discipline to prepare myself for what happened. And when preparation meets opportunity, man, a lot of great things happen. And when I don't and didn't, the pain of regret of being, overmatched, losing badly, being embarrassed, man, those are regrets that live on ESPN forever. And it's like, man, did I really do the work? And I didn't prepare accordingly. And now here I am. I would think one of the best lessons that's probably most important about athletes, and I see this in and this will really translate into entrepreneurs, is where I see special forces, I see athletes, and I see entrepreneurs who have a special skill called hyper learning. And they involve themselves with a bunch of their network all the time, and they're put into these places with people that are above them in authority to help them learn faster, coaches, advisors, sergeants, you in the military. And you go to training and you go through reps. Listen, confidence is prep and reps. You got to prepare and you got to get the repetitions. And there's no better example of that than driving. We drive and you go student driving, a year of driving with your parents. You got to have 50 hours. You've repped. And you and I, Mark, now at our age, like if our significant asks us to go to the grocery store, it's nothing, right? I don't have to think about like, oh, where does the key go? Which one's the brake?
Right.
I mean, we can eat a sandwich, while talking on the phone and messing with the radio station. It's amazing. And all this, and we're monitoring 50, 60 things all while we're driving, and we're doing it almost subconsciously.
But I mean, getting those reps and getting feedback, I think is key. So I'm thinking back to a time when I must have been 16, and I can still picture this vividly because the lesson really stuck with me. I was driving. My mom was in the passenger seat. we were at a light. I was in the left lane. I needed to get over to the right to turn in to some sort of business. And I did the wrong thing. I kind of gunned it. Not that my car could really accelerate that quickly, but I gunned it, cut over in front of that car to the right, and then put my blinker on to turn right. And I know the car honked at me. And my mom was like, I think she probably yelled. She's like, you don't cut in front of someone like that. I should have waited and cut in behind them. And I think I'm probably even still pretty mindful of that today. So, I mean, I didn't get, so when you think about yelling, that's not the only form of coaching, but when we talk about reviewing game film or watching like this drive for perfection, I remember Nick Saban at Alabama is famous for, like, Alabama could have been up 56-0 and a player made a mistake, and Nick Saban didn't say, like, no big deal because we're blaming. No, I mean, he'd still get in a player's face and chew him out.
It's a great example, man. I mean, he is the ultimate process king, right? He has got systems. He's got a standard that everybody needs to meet, and he sets that bar very high. And he sets the bar at the moon. And how many athletes of his hit the stars and play in the NFL for 17 years and still never, made it with him? Like, he's like, yeah, you're pretty good, but like, listen, you haven't hit the standard yet. And he's tough. And I can recall on those Saturdays where, I see a commentator going, oh my gosh, can you believe Nick Saban throws his headset down? He's 45-3, what's he? And I'm like, hey, listen, man, what they don't understand, and I got a firsthand experience of coaching with him in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is a rough conference, and people get beat up. And your depth chart is huge. In athletics, you have these depth charts of who's coming in, and so Mark Graban's our starting left tackle, and then all of a sudden, we're winning by 30 points, and we got to bring in Trent Clark, and I'm not on. I'm offensive, moving too early. We're getting penalties, and it's like, hey man, in 2 weeks, Mark's going to get hurt in the Ohio State game, and Trent, you're going to be the starter for the Penn State game the next week. Right. And he knows this, and he knows that it's coming.
You're going to be ready.
You've got to be just as good as Mark is. Mark is our best, and we love him, but we don't know when the next moment's going to happen, and we need someone in Mark's place. So you are constantly battling, and he knows that happens. And he's also ticked off, like, Trent, you've been at practice for the last 5 weeks. Now here's your chance to show us in a game what you can do. And going into the office, Coach Saban, I don't know if you know or not, I'm better than Mark. I should be in there. I was all city, in Battle Creek, back in 78, and everyone's like going like, hey, I think I can play. And now you get the chance, and you don't know the cadence, and you miss your blocking assignment. And you're like, hey man, you've been telling me this whole time you're a guy, and now I give you a chance. And this is what we get? What have you been doing to prep for 6 or 7 weeks? Have you been wasting all my staff's time? Because I hear them talking to you. I hear them. And he's offended. He's offended because I sat in your parents' living room and I said, I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to give you the best coaching. And so he did that. And so that's why he's upset. And I think the thing that's really challenging to me in my work is I go in and I work with leadership teams and organizations. And yourself, you didn't play sports beyond high school. I don't think you did, music beyond high school.
I did college marching band.
So you have a coach in college marching band. Yeah. You have somebody.
Yes.
And I meet a lot of people who haven't had a coach since their JV basketball or volleyball team. And I'm like, you're 42 now and you're the CEO of the company. You haven't had any coaching for like 25 years? And they're not ready for feedback. Because, when you're a coach, you get when you get coaching around you, especially the best in the world at it, man, you honor that feedback. You're like, Coach Madden, what should I be doing better? Right. Like, Coach Socia, like, and I mean, I'll never forget a conversation, we're having with Coach Socia and a young catcher, and Mike Socia's won a World Series as a coach, and he's also won a World Series as a catcher in Major League Baseball for the Dodgers. Right. And he's responding to this kid, helping him through this program. And he goes, yeah, but my dad says. And I'm like, hey, man, what does your dad do? Well, he owns a plumbing supply house. Well, of course. Listen, I have full knowledge that this young man trusts his father. His father loves him. He wants what's best for him. He wants to give him good advice. But this is not the person you should be listening to in this situation. Yeah, but I hear 3 times and I deem you uncoachable. Yeah, but in our last company did it this way. Yeah, but that's not the way I like to do it. Yeah, but my client says they won't accept it this way. Hey, listen, so you're not willing to take any feedback then because you're not coachable. And so when I talk about that ACE, right? I want aces on my team. I talk about this in the book. ACEs for me is an acronym for CARD. Coachability, adaptability, responsibility, dependability. And everyone goes, hey, Mark, we got a great team here at this leadership group. You're going to love them. I'm like, oh, great. I'm happy to meet these big 8 people running this $20 million organization. And I find out 2 are not coachable. I find 2 have no adaptability. Like, oh, I can't change. We've always done it this way. We can't change software. We've been using this since 1996. And I'm like, really? Like software? And then I've got 1 who won't take responsibility. It's Mark's fault. It's Trent's fault. And then I got 1 who no one's talked to, proving that he's not or she's not dependable. And so they won't give him anything because they don't know if it's going to come back or if it's going to get done. So I'm like, hey, you just told me you had a superstar team. I've been here an hour and a half, and I just poked enough holes to tell you, I don't know where you recruited this team, but we got some work to do here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want aces.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's big opportunities. I mean, I've learned in different settings as a consultant or a coach, labeling something a leadership team or an executive team doesn't mean they're really a team.
That's for sure.
Sad to say.
Yeah. Have you ever asked people like what's their idea of a team? I mean, you get a lot of different answers. And I think that's fair. I mean, I think that people have been in different environments. And, I don't know, did the marching band consider themselves a team? Because there's a lot of alignment that's required there.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
and I love the symphony, right?
Yes, and I had great leadership examples demonstrated to me, and I had to practice being a leader, and I made mistakes as a leader, and including reacting to one of the other drummers making a mistake in their playing or in marching the wrong direction. And I mean, look, I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes, and it's opportunities to kind of reflect and at least try to get better, coach myself. But one other final question I think I wanted to ask you, Trent, when it comes to mistakes.
Wait, hold. Can I say one thing about what you just said real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think this is really important for people to hear. Is that we judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their actions. So I as a leader, that's a really challenging thing. And as a young leader out there, understand that young Mark Graben, who's very good, he's been put in leadership in the band as a junior, senior now, still making errors every once in a while, right? But hey, I didn't intend to make errors. I did the prep work. I did this. Shoot. Come on, Mark. You know the step. You messed it up. And you forgive yourself because your intent is good and well. You're going to be the best. But when the freshman, Jill messes it up again, you're like, hey, your actions are out of line. This has happened now 5, 6 times. You're not doing the preparation. I'm not pleased with you. And so we're judging that immediately because that's all we have. And we forgive ourselves because we have good intentions. They have good intentions too. I've never seen anyone walk off the field like, oh, how'd you drop that ball in left field, Trent? Oh, Mark, I was hoping I would.
Yeah.
Like that was my intent. I went out there and I was like, man, golly, I hope that sun hits my eyes right, so I just can't see it. Like you're coming in and you got a coach standing on the top of the steps, airing you out 90 feet before you get to the dugout. Like, Clark, what are you doing? You dumb SOB. Like, oh, that was my intent actually out there. I was thinking like, man, I'd really get ahead and solidify my starting position if I drop some balls out here. Come on, man.
Yeah.
The intent is not there. It's a mistake.
Right.
We got to manage that better as leaders.
Yes. And there's a phrase, it's funny, it comes up sometimes in the healthcare literature about mistakes. There's this phrase, unintended mistakes. And I'm like, they're all unintended by definition.
Yeah.
It's just a mistake.
Yeah. What do you mean unintended? Like
what intentional mistake is like throwing a game or it's sabotage or like intentionally fumbling. That Northwestern had a scandal, unfortunately, 30 years ago where a player was involved in gambling and he did fumble intentionally. That's a life mistake, but that wasn't the same as like you got hit, just the wrong way and the ball popped out. Yeah.
Intentional mistakes are going to immediately go against our values. No one needs
Mhm.
that character on their team. Like, hey, listen, and I was a part of a tragic thing at the University of Toledo when I was playing there. Um, there was a fire in a dorm. There was a shot fired across a dorm, missed a child, a young college kid, right above his head in the loft. And then a young lady was taken, killed, and it turned
Mm.
out the whole thing was a police officer who had justified in his mind that we're going to have budget cuts. I need to create really scarcity and fear on this, so they will not
Oh god.
eliminate job posts here in the police force at the campus. That was his
Yikes.
justification. Like,
Yikes.
how did we miss the character and integrity of our standards in that interview process? And this is where I think people are missing, Mark. You're not working
Yeah.
hard enough to get the right team members. Like in baseball, we
Mhm.
scour the
Mhm.
backwoods, the fields, the farms to find the right talent, miss all the time. And yet you're continuing to pour money into getting scouting and the right player. And then I got a great team. How did you hire everybody? Oh, well, they had a pulse, so we hired them. Like, wait a minute. Do you know their values? Are they aligned with
Yeah.
what you're trying to go for?
Right.
Do they
Right.
belong here? Do they because you're going to run into so many issues trying to build a team of people who are not aligned with you, and especially from a value standpoint.
Yeah. That's a great point. And so back to that last question, we talk about leadership and how we react to mistakes. When you and I talked previously, you shared with me that you get excited about mistakes, I think in like a
Yeah.
positive way. Tell me about that and how
Yeah.
people react like that.
Yeah, I do. This is great. So everyone knows Mark Graban has been on Winners Find a Way, and so you're going to want to look up that show because he's a fabulous guest,
Yeah.
and obviously the author of a fabulous book too, Mark. And so when we got into this, I just love your idea of mistakes because I am a mistake enthusiast, right? I come from an environment
Mhm.
where you muck it up 70% of the time in a very David versus Goliath kind of story, right? Like this is 9 against 1. Like this is tough odds. So when you're successful 30% of the time, you're a hero and you make millions, right? And so there's
Yeah.
a bunch of failure. And so here's the thing that, we know mistakes are a great teacher. Your podcast, my favorite mistake, and I'm sure you've heard this, right? Oh my gosh, how many do I have? There's so many to talk about, right?
Right.
We have all
Right.
made a lot and we've all learned a great deal. And if we haven't learned from, that's tragic, right? But when
Mhm.
people,
Well, and not everybody has
yeah,
learned. That's the
yeah,
same thing. The
that,
sad thing. People on this show have
yeah,
learned.
that is, it's sad, and I think it's a mentality, right? And so part of my
Yeah.
mentality of mistakes is I get so excited about mistakes, I begin to smile, I get joyful, and it's palpable that a team that's facing a significant adversity are like, your reaction is not in alignment with ours. This is doomsday, Trent. Coach Trent, I don't know what
Yeah.
you're all excited about. And I'm like,
Yeah.
because I can see where you will be 9 months from now, and your organization
Mm.
is now going to be the organization you've always wanted to be, because now the pain is big enough that you will take an action to change it and do something different. And that excites me. And so when you think about
Yeah.
our backyard man, Henry Ford, you're looking at an industry that changed the entire logistical patterns of our country when no one could afford a car. They're $15,000 at the turn of the century in 1900. They're very expensive. This guy is going to build a system where the common folks can afford an automobile for their home. Not two, not
Right.
three, but it's going to be $3,500. And you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this assembly line system, and I'm going to learn to pump these things out, because right now only 3 per week can be made, which is what makes them so expensive. But I can make 300
Mhm.
a day on an assembly line process.
Right.
And I can make these things affordable where people, now we're going to build roads and infrastructure, and it's going to change the superhighway and how we get along and know each other and learn other cities and go to other places. And man, the vision of that, what I would call a mistake of how do we fix it? It's so expensive. We can't do
Mhm.
it. No one's ever, he figured out. Right. And
Yeah.
it's just like, man, you can see the future of how you'll change your process, and I get so excited about it. And so the reaction to me is often, comical, because when you're in pain, it's a natural reaction to laugh at it, right? Like, because sometimes it hurts so much, you're just like, man, it's something to laugh at, makes me at least feel a little better, because I can't believe we made this error. And I love the story of the guy from, IBM. I think it was IBM. I might be wrong on that, but like, there's a high level executive. He spent like 8 quarters. The stock price is going great. I mean, 2 years on the job. No other integrator like this. He makes a massive mistake, costs the shares like $33 million to the bottom line. It's a huge error, and it's going to affect the stock price for a quarter for sure. And yet, probably the stock price has already doubled that in his tenure. So it's a step back for sure. And the board says immediately, well, let's get rid of him. Let's fire him. And the CEO says, well, I'm not going to fire him. I just spent $33 million training him. Okay? Right. Like, why would I do? Why would I do that? Like, he's great. He's had all this success. Right. We have a mistake, and we're going to learn from it. But what do I do? Hire someone else, and they make a similar mistake that costs me?
I've heard so many versions of that story of, we fired the person who was quote unquote responsible, and then someone else makes the same mistake because they didn't improve the system. And who's least likely to make that same mistake? Somebody who's made the mistake. Now, I think we've got to move beyond saying be aware, be mindful, because that can wear off. But partnering with somebody who was involved in a mistake to help prevent the future mistake, that's really effective.
Really effective.
Yeah. Well, Trent, this has been great. I could talk to you all day, and that's even just on early '90s Tigers who you probably met and knew. I could name more than 5: Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell, Kirk Gibson. Just great players that were still hanging around, still there from the '80s heyday. No, it was never a dynasty, unfortunately. They only had the one World Series, and they had one other key playoff run, but a lot of talent, a lot of characters, including
Sparky. Well, and I'll give you one more character that was influential to me, because I grew up not seeing TV, not seeing the Tigers in Battle Creek, and I listened to Ernie Harwell. And
oh my gosh,
when I was a kid, I walked into my dad's office every night coming in, and I'd listen to the last 3 innings of the game, and Ernie Harwell would make the call. And now the 84 team wins the World Series when I was 14, and now I'm 23 with the big club. I'm in spring training, and I'm sitting at a breakfast at 6 a.m. in the morning. First time in Lakeland and Tigertown.
Lakeland.
And a man comes up behind me at breakfast and, hey, fella, you think I could have breakfast with you?
You hear that voice.
I go, turn around. Yeah, Mr. Harwell, sure. And this is before cell phones, right? Wow. This is like 1993, maybe 1994. And I went the whole day. I go in, work everybody out. It's early. It's still pitcher catcher. So we're done about 3:30, 4 o'clock. And I run to the phone at 4:30, and I call my dad. And I was like, Dad, you can't believe it. I had breakfast with Ernie Harwell today. It was so awesome. And we were just giddy, It was awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the excitement and the dream of being involved in sports. And I'm glad that you've. It's just interesting to hear. It's amazing to hear of all the different things that you've done. Sports and past sports. I feel like we've given short shrift to your post sports experiences, but really thank you for sharing your story and having such a great conversation. I hope people will check out the book by Trent Clark, Leading Winning Teams. Check out the podcast, which I'm excited to have been on. Making a mistake. Where's the name of the podcast in my notes? Help me out. Winners Find a Way. I made a mistake. And so with that, we're going to close out the episode. Look for links in the show notes to Trent's website, more about his coaching, his book, his podcast, and more. So Trent, thanks.
Thank you, Mark.